I know you've been in the business for a while. You started out in radio. Did you grew up in Sacramento?
That's right.
Okay.
And yeah, I started out in radio there.
Was radio like that was the be all end all for you? What were you listening with, the traditional transistor radio, Casey Kasem, and you knew the jock on the
Well,
air?
all of that stuff, but I think for me, I had and this is probably true of a lot of people that get into entertainment and radio in particular. I had a pretty traumatic childhood with, divorce and a lot of moving. I moved 7 times in 8 years, between the ages of 10 and 18. So that was, just
Oh.
traumatic in itself. And in addition, I think I wasn't really getting the attention, maybe the support, and I was a bit abandoned by my parents in some ways. And so I was looking for that kind of attention and so forth. And I would call into radio contests, and I got into the music through that as well. I just really, the original Tower Records was down the street from my house. I could ride my bike there, my Stingray bike with the banana seat. Mm-hmm. And so 16th and Broadway, they actually were originally in this place called the Tower. It was a Tower drugstore where it started, and the record store was in the back of the drugstore, and it was the father of Russ Solomon who started it, and then he had the drugs in the front, and then the record store in the back, and then it became a record store, and then they moved across the street. So 16th and Broadway in Sacramento. And so between that and the radio stations, that's what really kind of got me involved in it, and winning the contest and hearing my name on the radio. And then, sometimes they'd even play your voice on the radio. They'd play, hey, and you'd hear they'd record the phone call and then play it back. And that was a huge thrill. So that was me getting recognition that I needed.
It's also a connection, right? You feel connected to the personalities, and, when you listen, just your regular listeners. Yeah, I get that. Wow.
Yeah, then I became kind of a groupie of these DJs and of the radio stations, and eventually, I was a very new young DJ. As soon as my voice got low enough to be on the radio, I talked somebody into letting me go on air.
What is it that led you to you drove up, you're riding in your Stingray to the radio station, and because you didn't have a driver's license, and right? Or
to Tower Records, that's where I would thumb through the records and buy some. But I mean, the first records I bought weren't even rock. First records I bought were like, they're variations of rock, let's say. They were more funk and soul. I was like buying stuff like Average White Band and Ohio Players, Earth, Wind and Fire records.
What was the radio station you were listening to? Was this?
Well, there were 2 top 40 stations that were competing, and they were AM. So it was KROY and KNDE. 1470 Rock Candy, they called it, or Candy, and then KROY, 1240 KROY.
Love it.
Okay, so how did you get the first? Did you just?
Okay, so the first gig actually was for us. We had moved to another part of town. I was, a little older, and I was in this area called Fair Oaks, and there was this radio station called KROI, and it was a sister station to KROY, but it was FM. So it was sort of like, low ratings. It was kind of like new, and I was like, what is this FM stuff, And, there was KZAP was the traditional FM station in Sacramento, which was like a progressive rock station, similar to KSAN in San Francisco, or probably like KMET here in LA, and more freeform progressive at that time. And so this was like a kind of a mixture of like hits and album cuts. So it was a hybrid station. It was weird, but they called it I-97, and I won a contest of, they were giving away a Living Thing, which was, I think, supporting ELO's Living Thing record release. And I didn't know what a Living Thing was. And so my mom ended up picking me up to visit me one day, and I convinced her to take me to the station. And the DJ was not, receptionist wasn't there. And it was a tiny building, like in a weird part of town. And it was bike rideable, but she took me there, and I walked right past I had no boundaries as a kid, and I just walked right past the reception area because there's nobody there, and walked down this long hallway. And then the next thing I know, I'm in this room with all these like reel-to-reel tape machines. And I was like, what is that? Where's the DJ? So there's the guy there, and he says, I said, where's the DJ? And he's like, oh, well, come with me. And so he's walking me back out, like, who is this kid? Why is he in here? And he's explaining to me, this is a secret you cannot reveal to anyone, but we're an automated station, and everything's pre-taped. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then anyway, the story goes that I was then working for the high school yearbook in my freshman year. And I remembered this guy, meeting that guy, and he had the same name as me because his name was Robert John, which is my actual name. And I was like, okay, I wouldn't forget that. And so we were supposed to sell ads for the yearbook. And so I called him up thinking, oh, I can sell an ad. And the receptionist remembered me, put me through, because it was weird because she got kind of busted for leaving her post. And so she remembered me. And anyhow, he ended up being the program director, the guy that I met. And so he was like, no, I can't buy an ad, but, thanks for coming in anyway. And because if we bought yours, we'd have to buy ads for all the radio stations. I mean, for all the high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me to say, hey, well, do you have any jobs available? And so he had me go home and get this thing signed that said that I was working illegally. And it was like this disclaimer because I wasn't old enough and I wasn't going to be paid. And so my dad had to sign this piece of paper. And of course, my dad was resistant at first because he thought it would interfere with school. But I was like, who cares? And I convinced him to sign it. And then I became a telephone request line operator. And there they didn't have DJs answering the phones because it was all automated. So you had to have somebody answering the request lines. So that was my job. And I would do that for like 3-4 hours a day. Then I got the job of music research director, where you got to count up all the hashtags. And then you had to start calling record stores later, as part of that too, to find out what was selling. So that was fun. And then later, a couple of years down the road, I got on the radio.